Dave and Mark, just wanted to invite you guys in here, and really from terms of the C1 network, we're thrilled that you guys have been a part of it for so long, helping us to define a lot of what it means to be a healthy leader. And of course, Dave, you've been doing that for, I don't know, like 70 or 80 years. No, but you have been doing it on a very broad scale. So if anybody's not familiar with Apples of Gold, that's you. You were in the foundations of that, and Equipping Ministries International was formed out of that early beginnings, and now operates in over 100 countries and in many, many languages. Your material, you've updated that to being listening for heaven's sake, and then added so many other pieces to it. From a C1 perspective, one of the things that we've partnered on to, I think really has been a huge blessing to us, are our dream retreats. The idea that something that Dave created, helping people to really understand how God's wired them and the delights of their heart and God's desire that we would live that way. So anyway, I wanted to introduce you men and give you a platform to be able to share what EMI is doing, what your vision is, what your direction is, and how you can really help the C1 members to grow in their health.
Great. Awesome. So it's great to have you guys here. And basically, well, let me just find out from the people I can see on the screen. How many of you guys have had some contact with our Listening for Heaven's Sake or any of the EMI courses? Almost everybody, including Mark. So I don't have to talk about that too much. Okay. So basically, we've been around for the ministry over 45 years. And it began in a church that was undergoing kind of, everybody suddenly started to realize that people needed healing, and they were trying to figure out how to get some healing. And so about 30 people got together and began praying about what God could show them. And out of that came what we now know as Apples of Gold, and a lot of our training that grew up out of a healing ministry, and inner healing and outer healing and every kind of healing. And what happened from then on is that as we began creating stuff, we realized we needed to equip everybody to get healthy and help their churches get healthy. And so I have a little slide deck. It's really short, but if anybody's been around me for any length of time, and poor Mark, he's heard way too much. One of my great heroes of my early faith is I'll bring that up here in just a minute. You're going to see his face. So let me bring it up here, and I guess I can share, right? Oh, Mark, why don't you introduce yourself while I'm getting all this ready here?
Well, yeah, sure. Good to meet you all. Thanks for having us today. My name is Mark Wavle, Assistant Director at EMI. I've been involved for 7 years, I think. Anyway, took my first class about 7 years ago and got hooked very quickly, and absolutely in love with the mission and what God's called Equipping Ministry to do. So it was just natural to become aligned with it. So I've seen a lot of significant impact in people's lives, including my own and my wife's. So we're very excited to be part of C1, and yeah, glad to be here.
Great, thanks, Mark. So what I have on my little slide there is it just says practical mini skills for making the impossible doable. And that's kind of my theme for today. It's not really a tagline for us or anything like that. And part of it comes out of this guy. Anybody know who that guy, except for Mark? Mark will know because he will know right away. So if I tell you his name was Anne von Buell, and he was born in 1929 and lived until end of September 2022. Any good guesses, anybody? Everybody kind of knows him by his first name, which is not, in English, it's Andrew. Anybody ever heard of Brother Andrew? So Brother Andrew was one of the first books I ever read as a Christian, was God's Smuggler. And it really did set me on a course of wanting to operate by faith and wanting to help to do the things that were absolutely impossible. So if you don't know about Brother Andrew, he's probably responsible for more people coming to Christ in more countries than anybody I can think of. He smuggled Bibles into the former Soviet Union and all the Soviet bloc, China, spent most of his life doing things that everybody else thought were crazy and impossible. And so I got this little quote from Brother Andrew. I've been going through all his old videos and stuff, kind of as a celebration of his life and his impact on me. And I've gone through the audiobooks that he created and all kinds of things. And just a little thing, I had an opportunity, I used one of his quotes in one of my books, and I was trying to track it down for my publishers because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making it up. And so I called Open Doors, his ministry, and they said, I asked them, hey, can you find this quote for me? They said, well, I don't know which book that is in, and we'll check and we'll find out. And so about a half an hour later, I got a call from this guy with a Dutch accent. And he said, so I understand you want to know about where this quote came from. I said, that's right. He says, well, I can't tell you because I can't remember. Because at that time he was probably 80 something. But you can put it in your book as from a personal conversation with Brother Andrew, which is how it went in, which just made my day, made my month, made my year. If you only hear about a great need or a great challenge or a great opportunity and nobody tells you how to be equipped with the power and the energy and the faith and the vision and the skills to go there and do something, that's just frustrating. How many guys have felt that kind of just frustrating? Yeah, it's something I constantly feel like, man, I wish I knew how to do this. And all of us, the reason why you're here and the reason why you're in C1, because you're not only called to do what's impossible like Brother Andrew, and he literally did go to over 60 countries that he couldn't get into because God told him when he prayed, he said, what do you want me to know? He said, there will be no closed doors for you. That's how Open Doors got started. So you're not just called to do the impossible, but to equip others to do the thing that is their impossible. So I kind of love that idea. So kind of the beginning, you guys, just a biblical foundation. And I got a bunch of Bible scholars, so please forgive me. But Ephesians 4:16, anybody remember what that talks about? It talks about what equipping looks like. It's kind of explaining what we read in Ephesians 4:12. And it really talks about, and I won't go into it all, I'll just give you the summary. So it talks about a whole body. So what equipping looks like is a whole body depending on Christ. All its parts joined and working together. Each part doing its own unique job effectively. So that the entire body is growing strong in love. And that's why we're Equipping Ministries. That's why we believe in it. We envision a whole body that is depending on Christ, where everybody is full and abiding in Christ, and where all the parts are actually cooperating and working together and working out their stuff, and everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing, the unique thing that just they are supposed to be doing, and everybody growing strong in love. And here's the idea that the body of Christ doing all the things that Jesus did while he was on planet Earth walking around, and a lot more. So truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do and even greater things. So that's kind of, in my mind, at least, the kind of picture that we want to have. All right. So the whole concept that I'm excited about right now is I'm looking at a world where everything is just as whacked out as it was when Brother Andrew started. Communism was taking over the world. All kinds of things were bad. And God called him to do something about it. And he said, yes. And I have a feeling that's why you guys are in C1. God is calling you to impossible stuff. And you're saying yes. So I think that what Brother Andrew is saying, but we need to be equipped in a bunch of things. And what EMI is focusing on is equipping people in some foundational stuff. So Mark, go ahead and click that one, the next one. Okay, well, that's good. It all comes up at once. So kind of bodybuilding, which the building up of the body of Christ. And for us, that means attitudes, skills, habits that are biblical and practical and relational, and also reproducible in any disciple anywhere in the world. Which is why we've been able to work with so many countries, because it turns out if it's biblical and practical and relational and reproducible, it will work anywhere. And so that's why we get excited about that. And that's why we've been, for the last 40 something years, been doing it. And since the beginning, we've found that there's 3 core skills that seem to make the biggest difference. And since you guys have had Listening for Heaven's Sake, at least some of you, we start off with the biblical things. So be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And not just talk about it, but practice it, do it. And that's what practical means. If it's not, if you can't practice it, it's not practical. So a lot of what EMI is about is giving people the experience of the thing that they read about in the Bible. And so listen, and Mark, feel free to chime in at any time. It'll just be better for everybody. We'll have fun. Okay, so Listening for Heaven's Sake was our first and foundational course, because it turns out that if you don't listen, or if you're quick to speak and quick to anger, it's probably going to cause more problems. You're not going to be completely mature. So mature people listen. So what we found working on is teaching people the attitudes and the skills that allow people to listen, to be quick to listen, slow to speak. And so if you've had the course, I just heard another testimony from another person who was in our class, who was a highfalutin guy. A church, I think, that here locally near us has, I think, over 12,000 people show up on a Sunday. And so he came and he said to the person who was teaching the class, hey, can we shorten this? We don't have a lot of time. So, can we cut the time frame in half after our teacher got there to start teaching it? And she said, well, you just go through this first part and you tell me tomorrow how long you want it to be, because it was going to be a day and a half. That was a while ago. And so he came back in the morning and said, have you decided how much time you want to spend on it? He said, as much time as you want. And she said, why? I talked to my daughter last night. I didn't just talk, I listened to her. And as I listened to her, she opened up to me. And at the end of our conversation, teenage daughter, she kissed me on the forehead and said, thank you for being my daddy. My new daddy is awesome. And so that's the kind of stories, and we've got lots and lots and lots and lots of those that we've developed, but not only in relationships with fathers and daughters and with husbands and wives, but with pastors and with teams and with churches. So listening is a really powerful skill for going deeper with people, but it's not enough. You also need to learn how to speak truth in love. And so speaking truth in love is something just about every Christian can give me the chapter and verse on, but most of them will admit that they don't really want to do it. And so the attitudes that we're working with and the skills is how to stay calm and be clear and candid and caring and confrontive with people at the right time in the right way, in a Christ-like way. And so speaking the truth in love is one of those power skills that what I've seen in my observation over the last, with the thousands of people that I've worked with and taught, this is the one that people are really struggling with. So just raise your hand if you have somebody you need to speak the truth in love with. And Mark, if it's me, go ahead and raise your hand anyway. Okay. Yeah, it's all tough stuff, and it's not easy, which listening isn't either. But equipping people in these difficult power skills makes all the difference. So speaking the truth in love, listening and speaking the truth in love, not just the pastors and leaders. So actually, I talk to a lot of pastors and they say, it's not my job to listen, it's my job to talk. And speaking the truth in love is something that is too costly to do oftentimes, so they don't do it. What we want to do is give people a simple and practical way to do these things. And the last one is renewing your mind, which for some reason I didn't underline, which is all about replacing your earthly thinking with biblically sound truth that sets you free. Okay, and again, we're not just quoting chapter and verse, we're sitting down and we're practicing doing these things with each other in a way that produces fruit. And if you guys have heard of the Dream Getaway, the Dream Weekends that Tony and Mark and others have been doing for C1, it actually is teaching a little bit of each one of these courses as part of the magic that makes it work. And the people who go on the Dream Weekends, they come back saying, I really got to know the people in my group. I came to love them and understand them. And it was just incredibly deep and surprising that it could do that much in that time frame. And so these are the core courses. We have many more. And we also offer these to people from all around the world, international folks. Mark, go to the next slide for me.
Yeah, actually, you invited me in, so I'm going to come in.
I want you to be in. That's good.
So I just wanted to kind of touch on these from another angle as well, that there's a lot of these same types of things, that there are a lot of books out there, a lot of concepts available out there that are talking about these things, reflective listening, about setting boundaries, about not being flooded, those kinds of things. Again, though, for the most part, those are conceptual. And the beautiful part that I see in these is it's pulling together the biblical and the conceptual and making it practical, as Dave said. So these are things that are actually practiced. The reason why that's so critical is because mental assent, mental agreement with the concepts or the needs even is insufficient to actually walking it out, right? I can agree that it's good for leaders to listen to people, and I teach that in the business context repeatedly, but it really makes no difference unless those leaders know how to do that and know how enough that they've done it in a situation that's safe, so that when it's time to do it in a real situation, they go do it, which is my experience the first time I took listening. And then I went back to work and I had somebody mad at me, and I was like, well, I just practiced it, 2 days ago in class, so I might as well try it here. And that's exactly what we're going for here, is that it's practical enough people can do it. I wanted to pull in a story from one of our recent classes where we had a student from Uganda who was in class, and he told me he had very good listening skills. He told me a story of how the pastors in the region around him were struggling with a lot of the people in their congregations or the people in their spheres of influence. And there's some particularly troubled people, who maybe they were having trouble with their kids. They were even committing crimes. And so these troubled people, the pastor didn't know what to do with them. And the pastors are like, well, we've given them advice, but it's not working. And so they started to send these folks to him, and they called him the pastor who helps people. That's how he translated the phrase that by which they call him. And I said, well, what do you do that's so different? He says, I just listen. I am with them. I'm present with them, and I listen to them. And at the end of our time together, they say, thank you so much for helping me. And I go, I didn't tell you to do anything. I was with you. I listened. I was present with you. And while that doesn't solve every problem, and I don't want to try and sell it like it does address a root need that we all have. And in many cases, it is the way that God can meet somebody through us. Like, it's part of us being the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. And it was just really powerful to hear that from him. That's what they call him, is the pastor who helps people because he listens. I was really encouraged by that.
Yeah. And we've got 1,000 stories like this, and I imagine that the difference between this is a lot of pastors have been taught about how you need to be Superman, super person, whatever it is, and know every skill and do anything. But really, the power of pastoring and leading people is that your whole congregation starts doing those things. So it's not just one pastor who helps people by listening. It's everybody helping everybody by listening and speaking the truth, love, and renewing their thinking when they get stuck. And it's funny, I was just talking to somebody who was out at a big monster church conference out in California, and they were saying, yeah, they're telling us that the main 3 things that you need to learn how to do is listen, for heaven's sake, speak the truth in love, and renew your mind. I was going, I wonder where they got that. So I was kind of happy, put a big smile on my face. All right, let's go to the next slide, Mark. First, the top of one. So who to equip is kind of what I was getting at a minute ago. Click it one more time, Mark. So basically, these are courses for everybody. And if we can equip everybody in the church, and we can reach out to the community. So Tony, when he first got equipped in one of our workshops, he immediately started applying it and connecting to community people. Tony, can you give just a short thing of how you connected to the college folks
Well, yeah, I mean, on our campus, and now every campus, there's an epidemic of emotional lack of wellness. I mean, there is. And so we just said, hey, what can we do to help? And people can listen to each other, people can have conflict and share their tough things with each other. And then if they can renew their minds. So we offered it, partnered with the Dean of Students office, and we offered it to the Corps of Cadets, and had like 1,000 people trained in the first year of offering the tools, because again, it was a felt need. People recognized their need for just somebody to listen to them.
Well, everybody feels the need to be heard, and almost everybody needs to have someone speak the truth in love, and to help them to walk through how to renew their mind. And that's another thing. I know the reason I mentioned Tony, picking on him, he's been taking people on trips and doing these things with them in the car and in various places. So it also allows you and your congregation to build a culture in your church and your ministry where people they know what to do. The reason why it helps people so much is when you know what to do, you're less stressed. So a lot of times I think I should be doing this, this, and this, or I should be doing that, that, and that. But what I've learned is, if I just listen and I speak the truth in love at the right time, and I help people look at their beliefs and test them a little bit, it's amazing what will happen. And I don't have to do very much. So my stress level goes way down. And the people that I'm with get blessed, which is crazy. And I'm not the only one. And I know Mark and Christine, who've been with us for a little while, are finding people are lining up to talk to them and to spend the evening and for coaching and things like that. The thing in a church, though, the pastor can't be the one doing all the coaching. We need to have people that they can turn to a friend instead of just a staff member. And so that's part of our deal. Who are we equipping? We're equipping everybody that will do it. So when do we do it? Next click. Ideally, we want to equip. Equipping is an everyday function of the local body of Christ. We're always equipping. It's not just these 3 things. You're always equipping people in lots of things. These just happen to be the bodybuilding power tools that build the foundation. And so that's why we focus on these core ones. We have 14 courses altogether, I think. But these are the ones we teach the most often. Although I have to say the dream getaways have started to eclipse some of the other courses, and lots more people are coming to them. So what we recommend to people is offering the courses, the core, the listening, the speaking the truth in love, and renewing the mind 3 times a year, depending on how big your church is. So if you've got a lot of people, you might want to do it more. If you've got fewer people, you could probably get away with doing it less. But the idea is building and Pam and I, my wife, Pam and I are talking about doing more labs where people take the course and they come back and they practice it with the stuff that they're working on in their life. And it does two things. The people who are in the labs aren't just getting help from us, they're getting help from each other, and they're building connections, they're building skill at the same time. So anything you want to say about any of that, Mark?
No, I would just say yes. That's
Yes, no.
Agree.
I think the other thing, Dave, that's so beautiful about what God has led y'all to focus on is if you look at the data, you know, University of Michigan is running a study, a longitudinal study since 1974. Empathy in our country is drastically declined, drastically. People can't see things from any other position than their own. And I think that's why, you know, being able to have a church community where you can start to say, you know what, we don't all have to think and believe exactly the same thing about everything in the world. We can be empathetic, hear each other, sense what's going on, and value you even if you disagree with me. And I think that's something that's rare. I think the church needs it. And I think the world needs it in such a way as if we as churches can offer that. Well, like you said, it has to be a culture inside of your church if you want any hope of, you know, having it be spread. So that's one of the things we actually talked about at lunch today.
Yeah, well, empathy is one of those things that the world, you know, one of the reasons why the world is falling apart is because empathy is starting to crumble. And a lot of the things that we, you know, friendships, families are suffering as a result. And, you know, one of the things I loved about Brother Andrew, he said, I'm not against anybody. I'm just absolutely for Jesus. And so if I can be with somebody and not be against them at all and be for Jesus in that moment, and I can be with them, because one, I can't remember who said it. It's somebody I read one time wrote that being listened to, being connected with somebody feels exactly like being loved. And it's I like to think of, people have told me, Dave, you're just really humanizing all this stuff. And I say, no, I'm Jesusizing it. Because what we're trying to do is help people to be more like Jesus, more caring, more honest, more humble, because renewing the mind takes humility. All of this kind of pushes us into a posture which again allows miracles to happen, is the way I like to see it. What Tony was talking about it at Virginia Tech, and I mean, he had students talking to each other about very divisive topics and coming out to a good place, which is pretty hard to do these days. I would call that as near impossible on most campuses. And so that's the kind of power that we're talking about. Okay, so I kind of said when to equip, just don't stop doing it. Keep on doing it. And go to the next slide, Mark. And this is the one where I was kind of hoping to get to, because the most important part, we've got a few people. Any questions that anybody has about anything that's pertaining or nearby to the things we've been talking about? Questions, comments, whatever. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, David. Right up my alley. I mean, I've heard Tony speak very highly of the ministry you guys are doing and how impactful it's been on him and his ministry. Where could I go to get kind of a flavor for the content of what you guys teach to show my co-elders?
Good question.
Show them, hey, you know, because I've had to take careful notes, but you know, if I could take them to a website or something where they could see kind of this is a synopsis of what you guys do.
Sure. Well, let me point you at Mark here right now, because this is what he's been working on a good deal of, how to beef that up. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and as I say, that's also, well, I invite feedback too. So what you're looking for, if it's not clear out there, I'd love to hear some of what you were looking for too. But the intent of that, equippingministries.org is our website. And specifically, the area I would point you to is the courses area. So you can go in and look at Listening for Heaven's Sake as a course and see what that's about, and get some, a testimony or two you'll see on there, as well as some other elements, things that you could purchase and whatnot, that you'll get a flavor for it from that, or you could do the same thing for speaking or renewing in a number of our classes out there. So that's what that section of the website's intended to help you with.
Yeah, and one of the challenges with what we do, just to,
Perfect.
go ahead. Chris, were you talking?
Whoops. I was just saying that was very helpful to David.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank
Well,
you.
one of the things I was going to say is that it's one thing to look at it on a website, it's another thing to experience it. And I'm going to make a shameless plug for the Dream Weekends. Because I think that's one of the most exciting things that I've been seeing happening with the C1 network, among other things, but it's just wonderful. And we've got so many wonderful videos, testimonials that people have given us about that. And it really is kind of if they can take a weekend out and get away with a spouse, that's, I think, the power tool of giving people the experience rather than just some information. And Tony and others are trying to schedule those all the time. Tony, is there any updates on how that's happening now with C1?
Well, yeah, we're doing them as often as we can, but I think really where we are at this point is we're going to come into the conference. We're going to have a lot of testimonies about what this meant. Different regions like the Northlands have budgeted to do more work with dream retreats, for example, dream retreats. I know that that's the same thing with the Southeast region, have budgeted to be able to do more of what Mark and I did last week for them. And I have been doing the 2-hour version. You said that, in the car, but I've been doing the 2-hour version with pastors in the Midwest and others around the country. And that is available to anybody. Chris, we've talked about that. Just anything we can do to get you pieces of this. I think the 2-hour dream retreat, the one-on-one time, Dave, like you and Rick Beamer did for me last year. I've been doing that for people, and it's not 2 days. It's not, you don't get all the delighting time that we got down in Charlotte, but you get at some of the answers. What are the desires of your heart? And what are some of the roadblocks keeping you from doing it? I know that that's how Evelyn did it first, and really helped her hone in on deciding to go into full-time ministry and for this to be, her life. And I know that we've got another young man that's made that same decision coming off of just the 2-hour version. Now both of them went and did long 2-day versions of it after the fact because it meant so much to them.
And if you don't have 2 hours, I think I can say this, Mark and I will make an appointment with you. Tony, I think, also might be willing. Just experiencing the skill in something that you're thinking about, whether it's listening or speaking the truth out in love or renewing your mind, is way more powerful than reading about it or even seeing a video about it. And so we're willing to do that. And you have our website, and you'll get our information as well. So we really are very personal about doing this, and it's what we love to do in our spare time. Even when we're home, I'm always coaching somebody or listening to somebody or doing some of these things, as well as Pam and my small groups and all the various pieces. All right, I'm gonna leave more questions and answers if anybody has some.
Yeah, I'll just second that, Dave. I think even if you just had 15 minutes and you said, hey, I'd love to experience Listening for Heaven's Sake, I'd love to experience conflict resolution. I mean, the conflict resolution, speaking the truth in love, there's a lot to it. But you in 15 minutes, you could get that formula. We call it a formula, but honestly, it's just a really powerful way of speaking into something, saying something hard without creating divisiveness or defensiveness in the person. And again, 15 minutes, you could have a pretty powerful tool, honestly.
Yep. And that's true of all the things that we're talking about. I can help people renew their minds, do what we call a heart chart in a very short period of time. And it really is more powerful than watching somebody do it.
Yeah.
Although we do have some videos and things like that too, Chris. They don't do it justice. That's why I'm kind of saying the real deal with real relationships without a net is my favorite way.
Very helpful. Thank you. Love the personal approach too, and the practical uh, participating being the best way to learn how to connect with God versus just concepts. It's great.
Yeah. And, you know, and it's funny, I was telling you that one of the things that changed my life was Brother Andrew talking to me for 10 minutes. And it really did set me on a course. So very powerful thing. Any other questions or anybody else who wants to jump in? Mark's been doing this in the all these things in the corporate world and with CEOs and all kinds of people who are a little harder sells. So I don't know if he wants to.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the more interesting stories there is where a CEO came into a class. We were teaching for his whole company. His company of 50 people, and I could tell, my co-trainer could tell immediately, and he told us afterwards, confirmed what we kind of sniffed in the air. His immediate thought when he walked in the room was, "Oh no, I've wasted my company's money and time. This is not what we need. This is not the most important thing for us." They're very data-oriented organization, and so he was like, "This isn't going to help us with what we need as an organization." And he asked us challenge questions that kind of proved his perspective on that throughout the first part of class. But he started to see the value of some of this, of listening, of helping others by understanding their perspective and then inviting them to understand yours, those types of things. And by the time we got about a third of the way through the class, he started to change his perspective a bit. And when we started talking about removing projections, which is an important aspect of speaking the truth in love, that's when he had his breakthrough moment. And we had him in a practical group, in a small group, practicing that. And he had a light bulb, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I remember what I said to this other person, another leader in the organization last week. And I can see I had put a whole bunch of these projections in it. And wow, I bet that wasn't too helpful to the person I was talking to." And so they, his group worked with him to remove projections and find it, a way to say it so the other person would more likely hear it. And then right there in the group, this person he said this to last week was in that group next to him. And he just leaned over and he said, "Hey, Justin, remember that thing I said to you last week about blah, blah, blah?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that. That was not great." So, okay, so what if I had said this to you instead? And he tried out his new phrase, and Justin said, "That would be completely different. I get what you're saying. Yeah, okay, so let's work on that. That makes sense. I hear what you're saying." And the CEO was just like, "What?" Oh my gosh. And by the end of the class, instead of him being the one who thought we're wasting our time, I was closing out class and he said, "Mark, is it okay if I say something here for a few minutes?" I'm like, "It's your company." Sure. Say whatever you need to. And his impassioned 5-minute speech was better than anything I could have possibly scripted. He said, "This is what we need. This is what I need as a leader. So when you see me struggling to do this, forgetting to do this, please help me, because this is important stuff. I want all of us to keep working on this. This is how we will become successful as an organization." I was like, okay, that was a big switch, right? A big moment. But even more than that, to me, yes, that impacts those 50 people's work lives, certainly. I also saw it impact outside of work. So there was a guy who came up to us in the first break. He's like, "I looked at the agenda. The stuff you're talking about tomorrow, I need tonight. Can you like help me with this stuff? Because tonight I have a conversation with a really close friend of mine that's going to be tough. And I want to understand some of these things so I can show up really well in that conversation." Like, sure, let's stick around after class. Let's talk about it. I mean, it was impacting lives like that. As Tony was saying, it ends up being very attractive, right? And that because we're being very present with people, it is so unusual and so attractive in the world today.
And frankly, during the dream retreats, that happens on the side. It wasn't even part of the teaching time. We had something like that happen one evening, and it just transformed how that person was going to be able to interact with other people. And we weren't doing Speaking the Truth in Love, but that's what they needed. They needed a little mini course on Speaking the Truth and the freedom and the encouragement to go try it.
Tony, I wanted to ask you, do you guys do speaking? You said you weren't doing Speaking the Truth in Love on that particular Dream Weekend. Is that not part of the curriculum for that time or focus, or it just wasn't for that particular weekend?
It's not. Speaking the Truth is not part of the Dream Retreat. I mean, it's just not a direct, we don't have the training in there for it specifically. We do everything else during that time, but not speaking. Yeah, that's the only one. And
you're kind of speaking into each other's lives a little bit, which is a kind of that, but it's not the conflict resolution part.
Yeah.
But what we try to do is give people a taste of a lot of things that just so happen build relationships deeper. And so that's exciting. And one of the things I'll just throw out is on the impossible note, and it's a story. I don't know, have you ever had a thing where you got all prepared and you were all ready and 4 people show up? and it's like, And so I had this class, there were 4 people, there were supposed to be 20 people, and somebody died and there was a funeral, and everybody ended up going to the funeral because everybody loved that person, except for these 4 people didn't know him. So I get into the class and I started into renewing the mind. This is the class renewing the mind. And I gave my testimony about renewing the mind, which is a pretty powerful testimony, how God cured me of use this course as a way to help me overcome suicidal depression that I had for many of my a long time in my youth. And so we were into the class, and then one person raised her hand and said, so can I use this today to help me, because I have suicidal depression? And then another lady in the class raised her hand and said, me too. 3 out of the 4. And so we just used that skill that I was going to teach to the 20. I was really glad that there were only 4, because where we went was deep, deep, deep. But here's the great news. Those 3 people who were suicidal, at that time, they were presently suicidal. They came to the class looking for something. I put them in a group together with one other person, and was just kind of meet with them every once in a while, but they met every week for 3 years. And the amazing thing is their lives, all 3 of them totally turned around. They are not experiencing any of that they were experiencing at the time. The miraculous healing came through the fact that they were in the right place at the right time, talking about these kinds of things. And I'm not selling that as come if you have suicidal depression, this will fix you. It's just that God does do all kinds of things, and it's not just suicidal depression, it's all kinds of things that God uses, whether it's listening class or Speaking the Truth in Love or a dream getaway. We've seen massive breakthroughs in people's lives. So that's the healing aspect of what we're talking about.
Yeah, just to give an example, again, the conflict resolution class is fairly small, but my mother and I had gotten to a place where we really weren't communicating well at all, and she was saying some things, and I used those tools, and an hour and a half later, a conversation, our relationship is 180 degrees different than it was. And every time I brought it up before that in the last 20 years, she had gotten defensive. Changing just the way I approached her, all of a sudden she was able to hear what I was saying, and it changed our relationship completely.
Did want to mention as well that EMI, we do offer many of these courses publicly as well. I know, Chris, you're up the road from us in Columbus. It's a little bit of a drive, but not as much as for most people on the call probably. But we also offer them online. So for example, listening, we're going to offer in January, speaking in February, and renewing in March. So it's another opportunity. It's really for the reason you're talking about, right? We want people to come and experience it in some cases so that you can understand it better. It is so that's on Saturdays in upcoming months. That's also on our website too, if you're interested in that.
Yep. And this Friday, we're doing a hybrid version of one of the other courses we do, which also connects, which is called Freeing Your Family. And it's all about family dynamics. And it's all about using some of the same skills we're talking about to overcome the junk that's happening in whether it was your family of origin or whether it's the family that you're in right now or what's going on. It's just using a lot of the same tools that are biblical and practical to get a perspective first, and then also to say, oh, what can we do? What can I go home and do right now? So that's a different kind of where I'm always amazed that people don't just usually go, that was interesting or that was good. I usually get a phone call 3 days later and say, I didn't believe any of it, but I thought I would try it out on, this person. And it's always wonderful to have those phone calls because the conversion happens after the conversation lots of times. So very interesting stuff. Any other questions? Go ahead,
David
Chris.
and Mark, is that good for small children? The reason I ask is we have probably our most fruitful ministry at the church is one of our pastors leads it. It is almost the best way to describe it is kind of a Christian foster care type of respite care for families in crisis. So the focus is reconciliation with the family and, caring for a child during a family's crisis, taking the child into your home and so on. So there is a lot of woundedness there with the child and with their under-resourced parents. Would that be a good resource for that kind of situation?
For the adults and for the caregivers, yes. For the children, it's kind of going to be over their heads and it's going to be probably confusing. But what I would say with the family thing, it just gives a different perspective on understanding what's going on from generation to generation and where things come from. And so if you've got people who are leading those ministries, who are working with the kids, actually the basic skills like listening and speaking the truth and love and renewing the mind, fantastic with children. You have to do them in a slightly different way because you're adjusting to the people that you're talking to, and they don't have the experience to understand some of the concepts in the class. But it's very easy to kind of convert them into and we've had a number of people who've taken and done our stuff with teens and children, but we don't offer it ourselves. We actually have been working on a children's version for a while. It's still in the process.
Chris, if your caregivers were to have those tools and use them, I mean, just even warmth, just even the concept of warmth. If they were to engage with these children with warmth, which is one of the things we teach about body language and those kinds of things, it would drastically impact the way the child felt about themselves, about their relationship, I think, and their ability to open up and express their feelings and those kinds of things is what would be taught in those classes.
Right. And when parents actually suddenly get in touch with their own experiences and how they were parented, they suddenly have an aha. And when they begin to kind of break through and go, okay, I'm not going to do that habit that I picked up in my family. I'm going to go over here and do what they were teaching us in the class. We used to see an amazing healing come in families that way. And it turns out these three core ones, they have the essence of most of the things. The relational power of changing lives is in those three in a big way. It's in all the other ones, but the reason why we call them core is because they kind of work for almost everything. Any other questions about anything else? We've got tons of different things. We're actually working on opening this up in the corporate world, as Mark talked about, and kind of a mission field in the way we're looking at it in the moment. And I found that to get questions asked, you have to stop talking, but it's hard for me.
Well, that's good. I do want to wrap up and just be respectful of everybody's time. It is that time. But I think what you've heard is that Dave and Mark and myself, and really a lot of people that have been involved in this material, we want to make it available to you one way or the other. I mean, that's one of the things C1, I think, offers, is connecting us with really powerful materials that change people's lives, change people's ministries, change people's impact. And I think that what Dave and his team have come up with and what Mark and those guys are passing along is powerful. And so again, it's right in the heartbeat of what C1 is trying to help people do. So again, anything we can do, 15-minute conversation, hour of training, 2-hour training, online training, in-person training. This is what we want to be about. And so we think it'll help all of us be more effective, have more joy and more productivity in our ministries. So appreciate you guys, Dave.